work too. You don't need to be looking at your phone when that's a part of it. But what's the overall sweep of these three paragraphs?
So it is imperialism in the world's history.
Imperialism in the world's history.
I thought I got it wrong.
They go from, imperialism has been practiced in every period of history and in all regions of the world. And they take us from the Greeks and the Romans all the way up to the late 19th century. More than 2,000 years. So, world history. Number 9. What is the reason that Europeans spread their culture and religion according to that passage?
Because they found some period.
That's what it says in the beginning of the second paragraph. In the 1800s, many European nations established empires. There were several reasons for this increase in imperialism. First, Europeans felt superior to other cultures. Yeah. And one might argue, they still do. One might argue that the descendants of Europeans in the United States, many of them still feel superior to people from other parts of the world. So it's not only you have something I want, I'm better than you. And that's an attitude, that is hard to erase, hard to wipe out. As far as I can see, there's absolutely no justification for that kind of thinking, but a lot of people still think that way. And it was very clear, clearly stated back in the day of the British Empire by the writer Rudyard Kipling, who had this big poem that was hailed, in Britain as a very noble expression of humanity, called The White Man's Burden. It was the white man's burden to civilize the rest of the world. And so they were doing this as a favor, by colonizing all these countries, they were civilizing them. And people believed it. Okay. Let's see. That was 9. How about 10? And it said, which is an example of imperialism. Yvette, which one?
I'll pick A.
That's a good pick, yeah. I mean, clearly, they conquer the Inca Empire, they take over the territory, that's imperialism. You bet. You bet. 11. Which of the following developments was a cause of European imperialism in the 1800s?
B.
Was that D or B?
D. The need formal markets to sell goods and excess of raw materials.
Did the European countries have an excess of raw materials? They had too much wood, too much gold, too much precious metal, too much this, too much that. Not really. Not really.
As it be, and then the inputs on the market to sell.
Yeah, it is big when you go back to the passage, and that's where you're supposed to be able to find information that confirms your choice. You know, it's not, well, how much you know going in, or what do you think, it's what does the passage tell you? And it said with more products to sell, the industrial nations of Europe needed more places to market their goods. Third, industrial nations needed secure sources of raw materials that would allow their factories to produce their goods. So now the raw materials were when you conquered or colonized territories, and they served as places where, you know, the factories are going because of the Industrial Revolution. Now, stuff isn't being just handmade by people in their homes. They're gearing up step by step towards machines, and machines doing some of the work, and so they can produce a lot. Well, where are they going to sell it? You know, they don't have this. We're making it. We got a market for that. Okay, so now we're up to the chart. I wonder if snap. This is like Baskin Robbins. They got all these flavors of imperialism. Valerie Hay, what's annexation? What is that?
One country adding one country
Adds
adding
all parts of a
part
territory.
of a territory of another country to its own territories can be explained,
Accomplished
accomplished, or agreed, or by
military action.
Any annexations that you're familiar with in the last 20-something years?
I'm not too sure. I don't really follow.
Annexation.
Like that, the Russia-Ukraine war?
Yeah. Russia, actually. I wonder.
What I do
Let's see.
discuss.
No, I can't.
You need that. You need that is there to put in what you want. No, you didn't have to do that.
No, I didn't. Well, it worked.
That's what you want?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so fuzzy. It's all fuzzy here. That's terrible.
I got something with China.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, let's go over. Ukraine, there's a place here. This part, I think, is Crimea. Or it might. Oh, great. Kind of tense relationship between Russia and Ukraine for centuries, actually. But they just took it and the world seemed to say, okay. So they annexed it, and it's now part of Russia. Now they're trying to annex more.
I think I said back then, Ukraine was in Russia, or Ukraine was Russia.
It
It's
was
been-
part of Russia, but they
It's been a kind of a forced marriage or a shotgun marriage or something. You know, my grandparents, came from Odessa, part of the Ukraine, but they never considered themselves Ukrainian because at that time, all of Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. This is before the Communist Revolution. This is like 1905. And it was part of the Russian Empire. People who identified as Ukrainians. My grandparents did not. They identified as people who were persecuted by the Ukrainians and the Russians. So they had good reason to come over here. But the relation between Russia and Ukraine has been, you know, for a while it was a semi-independent Soviet Socialist Republic, where the Soviet Union, which was created after the Russian Revolution, had these other states, and they, you know, Kazakh and Armenia and all kinds, Georgia, which are now independent countries, more or less, were Soviet Socialist republics, part of the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, which in our alphabet looks like CCCP.
I think it's too ambitious.
So I think back to your question, why people still are fighting this
Yeah.
is because imperialism still exists.
Correct.
We're supposed to be able to tell one from the other. That was annexation, where you just grab something, you say it's mine. How about colonialism? What does that mean? Anne Marie, what's to say about colonialism?
All controlled by one nation over another, with the loss of identity and independence by the nation being controlled. Contrast with
Protectorate. Contrast with protectorate. Okay, so that means it's not exactly, it's different from a protectorate. So what's protectorate?
Arrangement in which a stronger country protects a weaker one. The weaker country retains its identity as a nation, but the stronger country takes full or partial control of its affairs. Contrast with colonialism.
so it's like an agreement and protect me and I
So that's like Britain over most of the countries in the Caribbean.
I wonder. They were part of the empire, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
It
then
still
they
is.
no,
But
not
Jamaica.
all.
Some are not, some left.
So yeah.
Trinidad.
Jamaica still
Trinidad is out, right?
Barbados.
But are they, would you consider them kind of protectorates now, or
Yeah. Take like orders from England directly. Yeah.
Guyana.
They have their own flag, their own money, they're independent.
So they're not controlled by Britain.
No.
It's still
No, but
controlled.
they
If there is a governor general there, you can say basically they're still controlled by because the governor general reports directly to the monarch, the king in England. And the governor general is the one who swears in the prime minister after there is an election. So
Well, that's like, sounds very much like, if not exactly, like the 13 British colonies in North America that became the United States. We had governor generals here, and they had governors, but it was the governor general that really ran the show as a representative of the king. Huh. Okay. So we got all cultural imperialism. What's
the country but on stipulation that you teach this in your school, and you do this, you do that.
Would they do that? Is that one of the things
Yes,
they did?
it's something instead of like one. They wanted Jamaica to teach gay rights in school.
Really?
Yeah, so that
That wouldn't be very popular in Jamaica.
No, it wasn't. It's still.
From what I mean, I've never been there, but from the Jamaicans I've met,
Jamaica, I think Jamaicans have lost that status of being homophobic.
yeah.
They have lost that, because there are a lot of gays in Jamaica.
Right.
You're working with them. But the thing is, just don't bring it to me or to my kids. That's where you'll see a great uprising against homosexuality. If you molest a child.
Well, if you molest a child, you're going to
bring
have
it to
a. Nobody wants to see that. You know, no matter how liberal you might be, nobody wants to see
They're
that.
even there in the government, so it's not that Jamaica is not a homophobic state, I would say.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear. I had one student here a few years ago who was upset. He was a dance hall rapper or whatever, and he was very upset that people wouldn't play his music because of his anti-gay lyrics. And he wanted the freedom to express his homophobia.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah, that was his argument. Yeah.
I don't agree with it.
Same as the United States troop to Ukraine. They're not there for war, but they support Ukraine
With weapons, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would qualify as military, certainly military support, but intervention kind of mean, to me, sending in. Yeah. And neo-imperialism, what's that? Amelia, what's that?
One country exploits the natural resources of another, uses its people for labor, takes unfair advantage of investment opportunities, or use it as a market to dump surplus products, sometimes called economic imperialism.
A lot of that. Even China's been getting into the act. 12 in the 1820s or 16th? 1820s. Protestant missionaries from New England introduced Christianity to Hawaii when King Kamehameha, according to those categories, with that. Cultural, that's what it says here. You go back and that would be, let me just check here. That's what it says, B, yeah. Cultural. There might have been more to it than just the Protestant missionaries. And in a few weeks, there'll be a video accompanying one of the on how we got Hawaii, because it's now a state, of the United States.
Yep.
It's halfway across the world. I mean, California, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. How is that a state? We will see. We will see. Portugal is this little green thing coming off of Spain. We studied that last time, how they became a country. Angola is all the way down here. Okay. Right. So they had a civil war before Portugal granted the colony independence in 1975. After World War II in 1945, gained their independence in the 1960s, in the early 1960s. Portugal held on to Angola another 15 years. The United States backed the group called the FNLA. The Soviet Union favored the MPLA, and neighbor South Africa aided UNITA. Oh, how nice. You got three warring armies. I'm sure it was a fun place to live. When South African forces entered Angola, because they entered LA. Which was then the Soviet Union, is telling them and sending them to fight in Africa. What actions were the Cubans taking? Does anybody know what? I mean, that was a big deal when the Cuban troops came in after South African troops. You know what effect that had on the rest of Africa? Anybody know? What was South Africa then? What kind of system did they have for ruling the people? Who was in charge of South Africa?
British.
It was I think it was a republic then. It had British descendants. It had Dutch descendants because they fought over the thing. How about the majority of the people there?
I think they were white.
Majority were black. And what kind of role in government did they have? None. This was the system of apartheid. Complete separation, although there was a third category and maybe a fourth category. There was black colored, which was mixed. The Indian was another thing because they had people from India. But no, it was completely dominated by the white people. And they had absolute segregation, as we had here in the American South for a long time. And the black people were there to work the mines and make the white people rich. That was basically what it was. And, you know, part of the reason that this could be, that this could last was that the rulers, and Nelson Mandela was in jail, in prison. So part of the reason was that the white South Africans would spread this, you know, talked about earlier, feeling superior. Well, they convinced everybody that they tried to, that we are superior, right? And the white people are superior. So when South Africa went into, when South Africa went into Angola, and then the Cubans, and these were supposed to be, now it's like the U.S. cavalry in the old Western movies. They're the superior fighting force. They're going to take over. Nobody can beat the white South Africans. Cubans can. To put it bluntly. And they drove the South Africans out. They defeated the South Africans. And people looked around and said, hey man, who are these Cubans? They look more like us, you know? South Africans superior? I don't think so. And that was a huge lift to the spirits and the psyches of black Africans. What is that? What is that? Can you summarize that paragraph? I mean, it's fascinating. What was going on?
Since China wasn't making any money off the drugs, they wanted it stopped. That's what I got from it.
Well, yeah, Britain wanted, you know, they had a imbalance of trade. They were losing money on the trade with China. They were buying more than China was buying from them. So they said, oh, well, we got a product, actually, that they'll want to buy once they try it. Opium. And they were getting the Chinese hooked on opium. With the British, they were pushing opium on the Chinese. And the Chinese government said, hey, well, no, we don't want that. That's not good for us. And they tried to fight it, and they couldn't beat the Brits. So
They still do
there's
it. And it
opium.
went into the West too.
There's opium all over there in the Golden Triangle.
They were doing it in the Wild West too.
The Wild West?
They brought it in, Chinese.
Oh, yeah, but they couldn't grow the poppies. No, but they grow. I mean, Afghanistan, that was their major cash crop for a long time. Opium is actually a very valuable ingredient in medicine. You have, you know, it's a great painkiller.
Yep. Highly addictive.
It can be. I mean, you know, we had this opioid crisis where people get hooked on that OxyContin. Fortunately, I mean, you know, but there are valid. Look, if you're in the hospital and you're on surgery and you're in excruciating pain, give me some morphine, give me some Percocet, give me something. You know, and it works, and you don't have to get addicted, like, you know, immediately. I found that Percocet, my dentist gave me that once when I was having teeth extracted, and because it hurt like hell after the painkiller wore off. And all it did was take away the pain. It's like a sponge that sucked up the pain. It didn't get me high.
When I had my wisdom teeth ripped out years ago, they gave me Vikings.
Like I think that's an opiate, right? Yeah, you bet it helps. So it's a valid thing. That the problem is that in other forms, you know, smoking opium or taking heroin, you really do get addicted, and heroin can make you feel so good that, and so can opium.
And it makes you feel so sick.
That you're trying to withdraw.
I had a girlfriend hooked on heroin, and then she had to do methadone to get off the heroin,
Right.
and then she got hooked on the methadone.
Of course.
It was bad.
Pick a side.
Yeah, no, it's tough to fight. It's tough to fight.
I don't know if she lived or died, but I hope she lives.
But anyway, here was the official policy of the government of Great Britain to market addictive drugs to Chinese so they could make some money. Akeem, can you read us the next part?
These technically of China, however, obeyed only the laws of their own nation. From Chinese authority, each sphere became a market for the country's products and a source of raw materials for its factories at home.
Time when China was the countries, and now China finds itself in a position of being carved up by the Western countries as well. You know, this is ours, this is theirs. Again, the Western countries the European countries kind of made a deal with themselves so they wouldn't have to fight over it. They just, like gentlemen. Okay. So what effect of the industrial, by the way, Hong Kong the lease ran out. It was a 99-year-old lease, and now I remember within the last 20 years it was handed back to China. And they had developed a kind of separate, well, very separate, because they were a capitalist economy. China had been a communist economy for years, and
Japanese take it very offensive when they call them Chinese. Japanese, they take it very offensive when you call them Chinese.
Oh, well, yeah, but I'm talking about Hong Kong, part of China, you know, and then taken over by the British with a lease agreement. Let's see. That's on this map. That's the same. Yes. Anyway, we see it on the map here. So it was handed back in. I thought that Hong Kong was so prosperous, so wealthy at that time, that really they were going to take over China. But it hasn't worked out like that. It hasn't worked out. It was very So we see these different spheres of influence, and we see the question, which effect of the Industrial Revolution is implied in the passage?
So Europe no longer desire cheese milk?
Chinese silk.
Chinese
Silk. Silk.
Where does it say Europeans lost their interest in Chinese silk? Yeah. And the European nations had industrialized, and China at that point had not. It was still largely agrarian, based on farming, agriculture. And the countries who had industrialized, who had machines who could turn out stuff, they were in a position to dominate the rest of the world. So that would be D. 17,
That's
which
D?
nation?
Yes.
D.
D is, I don't know why.
17, which nation had the smallest sphere of influence in China in 1912? And you have to look at the map there.
Germany.
Right. It's a treaty port, Hong Kong, which I think is across the bay from Hong Kong. It was Portuguese. The Portuguese got around. But such a tiny country, man, they really got around. It's funny because I've been to Portugal and people there are so sweet and kind and gentle, and the cars will stop for pedestrians. They got to. It's the law. Red light doesn't matter. Somebody's what? Here they say, red light, you're gone. You know, I mean, really. Very nice. They got around. It was most important to China when it fought the British in the Opium War. Right. Specifically the opium trade.
Yeah.
You know, keep that crap out of here.
Because of what was going on India was buying products from China. In return, Britain used opium to buy to trade with them. So India has the opium in which they brought now to China to trade instead of the silver and gold, which would cause an opium crisis in China.
So you think it was grown in India, the poppies?
I don't know where it was grown, but
Might have been.
I had Googled it, and there was mentioning that the British had went over to India and they had growing the opium over there.
In India,
Yeah.
yeah. That they grew in India, that they actually stole from China. You know what I'm talking about? The most popular drink.
Tiger Bowl?
What's that?
What was that?
Coca-Cola.
Tea.
Oh, tea.
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 When people brought back tea from China to England, oh man, everybody wanted tea, and in fact, it's still a ritual, right? Tea time, you know. Oh, afternoon tea, everything.
I thought that was really a British thing.
Well, it became,
It
but
became a British thing.
it became, and the tea came from China, and the Brits wanted to know, because what am I drinking?
Tea.
It's a stimulant, it's enough, right? Wakes. It's got more caffeine than coffee.
Really?
Yes.
Some.
Invaders to stole some tea tree from China.
Exactly. They in China. And the British said, hey, give us the secret, give us the trees. They said, no. They stole it. And I think it was they sent in some people as missionaries or what. Oh, we're going to convert the Chinese to Christianity. Meanwhile, they're stealing trees. And so they planted them in India. And they developed this whole tea
That's
thing.
how they stole gems from India and make jewelry.
So stole gems from where?
India.
India.
Yeah.
They steal from all
I
over.
think the
They
queen
steal from all
crown.
over.
Steal from all
Right,
over.
right.
They steal from Guyana.
Right. But
The Indians was always willing to negotiate.
C and 19, what is the only appropriate conclusion about Japan that can be supported by the information and what on the in the passage or on the map? Japan in here.
On the map,
On the map.
Japan,
Ah.
company,
Yeah.
and they show the treaty port.
Mhm.
So that's
It does say, yeah, it's not mentioned specifically in the passage, but it shows you spheres of influence. Russian, British, German, French, Japanese. So they how did Japan manage to get a sphere of influence? Well, get those spheres of influence to exert their control. And Japan, and the reason China couldn't resist them was that it was not an industrialized country.
So the answer was E.
So the answer was E.
E. Oh, E?
E.
Okay.
Oh, 19?
E. Okay.
Yeah.
For 19?
Yeah, I mean, Japan intended to early for that. That wasn't until about 35 years later, or 25 years later.
why a lot of stuff was said made in Japan.
Well, now it's made in China. And now we're going to pay more for it. Made in Japan meant it was low quality. You know, now it's high quality. Of course, when I was a kid, it was just after World War II. And they, huh?
What about made in Vietnam?
What about made in Vietnam? You know, we fought there for years and years. We fought the Vietnamese. Thousands and thousands of people were killed. We said if we lose the war, we'll never. They'll be communist, and it's lost to us. And now they're one of our biggest trading partners. Yeah.
So maybe years to come, Vietnam products will be high-end stuff, possibly.
Could be. I mean, you know, this world has always been kind of crazy, and it's just gotten really crazy. And I have no way of predicting, you know, what's going to happen next week. I mean, tomorrow. You know, I had class a few days ago. I went home, turned on the news at 11 o'clock, and said, oh, look, he wants to take over Gaza. What? 2 million people live there. Oh, well, they'll go somewhere else. What? You know, I mean, so you gotta, you know, stay tuned and
As they say, stay woke.
well, no, we can't stay woke anymore. Not under this administration. No. You stay woke and you're out of a job, man. No.
There's some way to lock all the employees out on
We have to check the news today and see who's still got a job. I mean, Elon Musk is firing people, and he's not even a government employee. I don't know what's going on.
Which does, to me doesn't make sense, because why have the people vote and then...
Well, we voted for Trump. You know, the people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah,
So he says, oh, they just elected me king. I can do anything I want. Yeah, okay. It's a new approach to the presidency, one that I certainly haven't seen. I get, you know, Roosevelt, who took office, who was elected in the depths of the Depression when the economy was terrible, when nearly half the people in the country couldn't get a job and were broke and were living on the street. He took dramatic action, and he's known for getting a lot done in the first 100 days. It's 3 months. We're not even 3 weeks into this guy's presidency, and he doesn't seem to feel a need to pass legislation through Congress. He just writes an executive order, and that's the way. So, you know, I've never seen anything like this. I have no idea where it's going to go. Anyway, next week.